Let's dive into ancient Greece and explore this incredible idea that a civilization's destiny, its art, its wars, its very soul, could be written right into its landscape. We're going to see how the land and sea literally created the world of the ancient Greeks. But first, just think about this for a second. How much does your own environment, where you live, shape who you are? Your culture, your community, maybe even what you believe? We're asking because, for the ancient Greeks, geography wasn't just some pretty background. No way. It was a main character in their story, and we're about to find out exactly why.
So, here's our game plan. We'll start with the land itself, see how it cooked up a world of fiercely independent city-states. Then we'll compare the two heavyweights, Athens and Sparta, watch them inevitably collide, and finally, unpack their amazing legacy.
Okay, so if you really want to understand the Greeks, their philosophy, their politics, all of it, you have to understand their home turf first. And their story is really a tale of two massive and totally opposite forces of nature.
First, you've got the sea. See, Greece didn't have a ton of natural resources, and the farmland was pretty limited. So, the Mediterranean? It wasn't a barrier. It was their superhighway. The Greeks became these master sailors, zipping around, trading with neighbors, bringing in food, and this is the crucial part, exchanging ideas and culture with the entire ancient world.
But, and this is a huge but, if the sea connected them, the land actively tore them apart. About 75% of Greece is covered in mountains. And we're not talking about gentle rolling hills here. These were like giant, rugged walls that chopped the land up into these little isolated pockets, making it almost impossible to unite everyone under one banner.
And this geography leads directly to the single most important political feature of ancient Greece. Because of those mountains, they never became one big unified country. Nope. Instead, they evolved into something completely different.
They created the polis. Now, a polis wasn't just a city. You got to think of it as a totally independent city-state. Each little valley, tucked away between those mountain ranges, had its own fiercely proud community with its own government, its own army, and its own unique identity.
And you can see the result right here on the map. This wasn't one nation, it was a crazy quilt, a patchwork of hundreds of independent states, all rivals and allies, each one carved out by the landscape itself.
But here's the great paradox, the thing that's so fascinating about Greece. Even though they were politically all over the place, culturally they were deeply connected. They all spoke Greek, they used a similar alphabet, they all worshipped Zeus and Athena and the whole pantheon of gods, and they built their cities around the same ideas, like having a marketplace, the Agora, and a temple on a high hill, the Acropolis.
Now, out of all these hundreds of city-states, two rose to become the absolute titans. And man, they could not have been more different. First up, let's talk about Athens, a city that was all about wealth, art, and the power of the human mind.
And the stuff Athens produced? It was just breathtaking. Their architects created wonders like the Parthenon, this magnificent temple for their goddess Athena. It was a symbol of their power, their riches, and their total devotion to beauty and logic.
They also basically gave us theater. In these huge open-air amphitheaters, Athenians would gather to watch comedies and tragedies, exploring what it means to be human. They created a whole new art form that, let's be real, we're still obsessed with today.
And maybe the biggest deal of all, Athens was the cradle of philosophy. You had guys like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle just walking the streets, asking the biggest questions you can imagine about justice, reality, and knowledge. They used pure reason to hunt for truth, and in doing so, they basically wrote the operating system for all of Western thought.
Okay, now let's go to the complete opposite end of the spectrum. If Athens was the mind, Sparta was the sword. Period. This was a society that looked at art and philosophy and basically said, no thanks. They had one single, all-consuming obsession, creating the perfect military machine.
Seriously, the life of a Spartan man was relentless. At just 7 years old, boys were ripped from their families and sent to live in military barracks. For the next 23 years, it was nothing but brutal, non-stop training. Then, they served in the army until they were 60. This wasn't a career. It was their entire life.
And this military-first mindset infected everything. There's a famous line that Spartan mothers would say to their sons as they left for war that just sums it all up. Come back with your shield or on it. In other words, victory or death. There was no third option. The state came before everything, even your own life.
So, You've got these two superpowers with completely opposite values jammed into the same small corner of the world. Conflict wasn't just likely, it was absolutely inevitable. For one brief, glorious moment, they did unite. When the gigantic Persian Empire came to invade, a tiny force of 300 Spartans made a legendary last stand at the Battle of Thermopylae. They were all wiped out, but their insane bravery lit a fire under the rest of the Greeks, inspiring them to band together and actually beat the invaders.
But that unity, it didn't last. The moment the outside threat was gone, their old rivalry just boiled right back up and exploded into the Peloponnesian War. This was a horrific, decades-long civil war that pitted the naval empire of Athens against the unstoppable army of Sparta.
And in the end, Sparta's army won. Athens was defeated, but it was a completely empty victory. The endless fighting had drained every city-state of its men and money, leaving all of Greece weak, exhausted, and wide open for invasion.
So let's bring it all home, back to that first idea. What's the final lesson we can take from the incredible rise and the tragic fall of the Greek city-states?
Well, here's the heart of it. The very same mountains that created that fierce independence, the thing that made Athens so brilliantly Athenian and Sparta so uniquely Spartan, also made it impossible for them to ever truly trust each other and unite for good. Their greatest strength was also their fatal flaw.
And so we're left with these two powerful competing legacies. You have the legacy of the mind, of democracy, philosophy, and art, and you have the legacy of the sword, of duty, discipline, and military glory. Two totally different answers to the timeless question of how to build the perfect society.
Which brings us to our last question for you. Thinking about their values, their achievements, and how it all ended, if you absolutely had to choose, where would you rather live? In the creative and sometimes chaotic city of Athens, or in the rigid, orderly world of Sparta?